Domestic real estate has undergone a 4-year deep adjustment. About 900,000 people have left the industry forever. As the upstream industry of real estate has also been greatly impacted, the high growth of real estate in the past can be explained as China is still in a stage of rapid development, and the population is still urbanizing. The industry should be in short supply. But with the slowdown of urbanization process and social changes gradually tend to long-term stability, the overall rationality of the industry, what should the scale be? Compared with international, will it be better or worse in the future? This article is not about house prices, but for real estate and construction practitioners, it is very valuable for reference. This is an article from the China Macroeconomic Research Institute, Investment Research Institute's International Comparison of Real Estate Scale. The countries participating in the comparison are the US, UK, and Japan. Looking back at the US, the relationship between residential investment and GDP can be roughly divided into 3 stages. The first, the period is before 1950. The proportion of real estate in GDP was about 2.5%. This period includes the Great Depression in the US in 1929 and the New Deal in 1933. The second stage was from 1950 to 2000. After World War II, the US also had a baby boom, so the real estate industry flourished, reaching a peak of about 7% of GDP, and then declined year by year. Finally, it stabilized at about 5%. The third stage is from 2000 to present. In the early 2000s, US interest rates were low, excessive credit expansion, and a large amount of funds flowed into real estate, which eventually led to the subprime crisis in 2008. It can be seen that, from 2000 to 2007, the US real estate also saw a small peak, but from 2008, it showed a diving trend, eventually falling to 2.5% of GDP in 2010. But then, the US government's bailout led to a strong rebound. From a 20-year perspective, this line is probably stable between 4 and 5%. From 1968 to 2020, the average ratio was 4.5%. Therefore, we can think that the long-term reasonable ratio of US real estate to GDP is 4.5%. The average annual population growth rate in the US was GDP's annual growth rate is 3.74. Let's look at the situation in the UK. The average annual growth rate of residential investment in the UK from 1997 to 2020 was 5.2%, showing a large fluctuation. The data of real estate in GDP is only the average residential investment as a percentage of GDP was. Therefore, we can think that the reasonable ratio of UK real estate to GDP is 3.4%. The population of the UK has grown by 0.59% annually in the past 20 years. GDP grew by 2.41% annually. Let's look at Japan. Japan can be divided into 2 stages. The first stage is the rapid urbanization period from 1955 to 1973. The second stage is the social stability stage from 1974 to 2021. The average annual growth rate in the rapid urbanization stage was 22%. The average annual growth rate in the stable stage is 2%. The ratio of the construction industry to GDP reached its peak in 1973, 8.7%, then gradually declined to 4.7% in 1985. From 1999 to 2021, the average residential investment as a percentage of GDP. Over the past 20 years, Japan's population has decreased by an average of GDP grew by about 0.38% annually. Finally, let's look at the situation in China. Our country's real estate and residential investment can be divided into 3 stages. From 1998 to 21, the high-speed development stage of 3 years, with an average annual growth rate of 25.7%. The low-speed development stage, from 2014 to 2021, with an average annual growth rate of 8.3%. The decline from 2022 to 2025. Development stage until 2024, with an average annual growth rate of minus 10.01%. From the perspective of the proportion of residential investment to GDP, it peaked in 2013, about 11%, then gradually declined to 8% in 2021. Only 6.3% in 2024. In addition, another set of data is added. In 2021, the national land transfer revenue was only 4.87 trillion in 2024. Only 1.43 trillion in the first half of 2025. Conclusion: the long-term proportion of real estate in GDP in the US is 3.4% in the UK. Japan is 3.5%. We currently have 6.3%. In 2024, China's GDP will be 134.9 trillion. If we refer to Japan's 3.5%, the total amount in China is about 4.73 trillion. If we refer to the 4.5% in the US, the total amount in China is 6 trillion. Should we refer to the US or Japan? We don't know. But the population of the US is continuously increasing, and its GDP growth rate is not low. Maybe the real estate is not bad. Japan's population is shrinking, and its GDP growth is also slow. Therefore, in the past 20 years, real estate has performed very poorly. Let's talk about China's data. China's GDP is still growing, but the population is starting to decline gradually. In 2024, the total residential investment in China, compared with Japan's steady state, there is still a 38% decline. Compared to the US, there is still a 21% decline. When the scale of the real estate industry stops declining, it may be the time for housing prices to stabilize. From a decades-long perspective, when a country enters a long-term stable stage, the scale of real estate, it fluctuates around this steady state line, fluctuating up and down, maybe for a few years, or for decades above the steady state line, or below the steady state line. So looking back, the past 20 years of hot market is not the norm. The current cold winter is the norm. Finally, if you ask what the macro depreciation rate of real estate is, the above 3.5 to 4.5%. Is the international macro housing depreciation rate?